The massive space station hung in the void like a metal city. Ships from dozens of different worlds came and went every hour. Some moved like silver bullets, others twisted through space like living snakes. All of them were fast. All of them were graceful. All of them made docking look easy. Then came the human ship. The USS Defiance moved through space like an old man walking through mud. It took the ship 20 minutes just to line up with the docking bay. Other ships would have finished the job in 2 minutes, maybe less. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his bridge and watched the alien crews gathering at the station's viewing ports. He could see them pointing at his ship. He could imagine them laughing. "Captain, we're getting some radio chatter from the other ships," said Lieutenant Amy Carter. She was young and still believed that being fast meant being better. "They're calling us the Space Turtle." Morrison nodded but said nothing. He had heard worse names before. The aliens always had something to say about human ships. Too slow, too ugly, too simple. They never understood that humans built things to last, not to impress. "Sir, should I respond to their calls?" Amy asked. Her face was red with shame. Morrison could tell she wanted to defend their ship, their crew, their whole species. "No," Morrison said quietly. "Let them talk." The docking took another 10 minutes. By the time they finished, a crowd had gathered in the station's main viewing area. Morrison could see aliens from at least 6 different species watching them. Most were laughing or making jokes to each other. Morrison walked off his ship with calm steps. His crew followed behind him, trying to ignore the stares and whispers. The captain was a big man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been flying ships for 30 years. He had learned that sometimes the best weapon was letting your enemy think you were weak. The station's cantina was full of noise and smoke. Aliens from across the galaxy sat at tables, drinking strange liquids and telling stories about their latest battles. Morrison found an empty table in the corner and sat down with his crew. That's when Commander Zakthor noticed them. The Kalani officer was tall and thin with skin like blue metal. His people were known for being fast, very fast. They could move and think quicker than almost any other species in the galaxy. Zakthor had never lost a space battle because his ships could dance around enemies like leaves in the wind. "Look, what we have here," Zakthor said loudly. His voice carried across the cantina. "The human turtle has finally made it to port." Other aliens turned to look. Some laughed. Others just shook their heads with pity. "I heard it took them an hour to dock," said a Vexian trader. "My cargo ship could have done it in 5 minutes." "That's generous," replied an Asthan diplomat. "I think their ship is actually moving backwards through time." The laughter grew louder. Morrison sipped his drink and said nothing. Amy's hands were tight around her glass. The other human crew members looked uncomfortable, but their captain stayed calm. Zakthor walked over to their table. He moved with the quick, sharp steps of his people. "Captain Morrison, isn't it?" he said with a smile that showed too many teeth. "I've heard stories about human ships. They say you once took 3 days to catch a smuggler that most fleets would have captured in an hour." "That's true," Morrison said. 3 days. Zakthor laughed. "By the time you humans arrive at a battle, the war is usually over." "Sometimes," Morrison agreed. The Kalani commander looked confused. He had expected anger, or at least some kind of defense. Instead, the human just sat there drinking his coffee like nothing had happened. "Don't you care that everyone laughs at your ships?" Zakthor asked. Morrison looked up at him with those tired eyes. "Should I?" "Your ships are slow. Your weapons are simple. Your tactics are boring," Zakthor said. "How did your species ever make it to space?" Very carefully, Morrison replied. This got more laughs from the other aliens. They thought the human was making a joke about how slow and careful his people were. They didn't understand that Morrison was telling the truth. Ambassador Veltra, an Asthan with silver skin and large eyes, leaned forward in her chair. "Captain Morrison, surely you must want faster ships, better technology? The Asthan Republic could help you upgrade your fleet." "That's kind of you," Morrison said. "But we're happy with what we have." Happy? Zach Thor almost choked on his drink. Your ships move like floating rocks. In a real battle, you wouldn't last 5 minutes against any serious military force. Morrison finished his coffee and stood up. His crew stood with him. You might be right, he said. I guess we'll find out someday. As the humans walked away, the aliens kept laughing and making jokes. They told stories about seeing human ships lumber through space like sick animals. They made bets about how long it would take the Defiance to leave the station. Some guessed 6 hours. Others said a full day. Back on his ship, Amy Carter paced around the bridge like a caged animal. Captain, why do we let them talk to us like that? Why don't we show them what our ships can really do? Morrison sat in his captain's chair and looked out at the stars. Because, Lieutenant, the best hunters are the ones their prey never sees coming. But, sir, they think we're weak. Good, Morrison said. Let them think that. Amy didn't understand, but she had learned to trust her captain. Morrison had been flying ships since before she was born. He had seen things she couldn't imagine. If he said it was good to look weak, then maybe it was. The Defiance left the station 12 hours later. The other ships had long since departed, for their various destinations. As always, the humans were the last to leave. But Morrison didn't mind being last. He had learned something his grandfather taught him back on Earth. Son, you don't have to be the fastest hunter. You just have to be the one who never gives up. The aliens would learn this lesson soon enough. The alarm woke Captain Morrison at 3 in the morning. Red lights flashed across his cabin as the emergency message came through the ship's communication system. He sat up in bed and pressed the button to accept the call. Captain, this is Colonel Lisa Hayes from Earth Command, said a woman's voice. She sounded tired and angry. We have a problem. Morrison got dressed quickly and walked to the bridge. Lieutenant Amy Carter was already there, along with most of his senior crew. The main screen showed a map of human space with several red dots marking attack sites. Report, Morrison said. Pirates, sir, Amy replied. A Vexian raider fleet hit 3 of our colonies in the past week. They're moving fast and hitting hard. Each attack lasted less than an hour. Morrison studied the map. The red dots formed a pattern, but not one that most people would notice. How many ships in their fleet? Intelligence says 12 vessels, sir. All fast attack ships with heavy weapons. They're led by a captain named Drake Sullivan. He's been raiding trade routes for 5 years without being caught. Chief Engineer Ben Clark stepped forward. He was a short man with thick hands and oil under his fingernails. Captain, the other species are saying this is our problem to solve. They won't help because they say our ships are too slow to be useful in their fleets. Morrison wasn't surprised. The Galactic Council had made it clear many times that humans were on their own when it came to military matters. The other species saw them as weak and slow. They didn't want human ships slowing down their fast attack squadrons. Sir, Amy said quietly, Earth Command is sending us to hunt down the pirates. Just us? Morrison asked. Yes, sir. The Defiance is the only human warship in this sector. Morrison looked at the map again. The pirate attacks were spread across a large area of space. Any normal military force would need at least 6 ships to cover that much ground. But Morrison wasn't thinking like a normal military commander. Ben, I need you to run a full diagnostic on our engines, Morrison said. Sir, is there a problem? No problem, just make sure everything is ready. And Ben? Morrison paused. Initialize protocol endurance. Ben's eyes went wide. Protocol endurance was something most of the crew had heard about but never seen used. It was a special set of procedures that only the most experienced human ship captains knew about. You sure, sir? Ben asked. I'm sure. Amy looked confused. Captain, what's protocol endurance? Morrison sat down in his captain's chair. You'll find out soon enough, Lieutenant. Set course for the Kepler system. That's where the pirates hit last. Sir, that attack was 2 days ago. They'll be long gone by now. I know. The Defiance changed course and began its slow journey toward the Kepler system. Other ships in the area watched them go. Morrison could imagine the alien crews shaking their heads and making jokes about the slow human ship trying to catch fast pirates. On the bridge, Amy couldn't stop thinking about the mission. Captain, how are we supposed to catch 12 fast ships with just one slow ship? Morrison was reading reports on his personal tablet. Amy, do you know how humans used to hunt on Earth before we had weapons? No, sir. We used persistence hunting. We would pick an animal and follow it. Not fast, just steady. The animal would run away and we would follow. It would rest and we would keep walking. Eventually, the animal would get tired and we would catch it. But, sir, spaceships don't get tired. Morrison smiled. Don't they? 3 days later, the Defiance reached the Kepler system. The pirates were gone, just as Amy had predicted. But Morrison wasn't disappointed. He had his crew scan the area for any traces the raiders might have left behind. Navigator Tony Miller was an expert at reading space trails. Every ship left traces when it traveled through space. Most captains ignored these traces because they faded quickly, but Tony could read them like a book. Captain, I've got their trail, Tony said. 12 ships, just like intelligence reported. They jumped to hyperspace heading toward the Rigel sector. Follow the trail, Morrison ordered. Sir, they have a 3-day head start. By the time we get there, they could be anywhere. Follow the trail, Tony. The Defiance jumped to hyperspace and began following the pirates' path. They were always 3 days behind, sometimes 4. Every time they reached a system where the pirates had been, the raiders were already gone. Other ships they met along the way thought the humans were crazy. A Kalani patrol ship captain called Morrison on the radio to laugh at him. Captain Morrison, you're chasing ghosts. Those pirates are probably halfway across the galaxy by now. Maybe, Morrison replied. Why don't you give up and go home? This is embarrassing to watch. Morrison turned off the radio without answering. On the ship, some of the younger crew members were getting frustrated. They had been chasing the pirates for 2 weeks without getting any closer. Amy was one of the most frustrated. Captain, this isn't working. We're never going to catch them like this. Morrison was in the engine room with Ben Clark, watching the chief engineer make small adjustments to their systems. Ben, how are the modifications coming? Almost ready, sir. The power core is running at 15% capacity, just like you ordered. When you're ready to go to full power, just say the word. Amy stared at them. 15%? We've been running at 15% this whole time? That's right, Morrison said. But why? Morrison looked at her with those tired eyes. Because, Lieutenant, the best hunters are patient. And patience requires practice. 2 more days passed. The Defiance kept following the pirates' trail, always arriving after they had left. But Morrison noticed something that the others didn't. The gaps between attacks were getting shorter. The pirates were getting confident. They were starting to think no one could catch them. That's when Morrison knew it was almost time to show them how wrong they were. Captain Drake Sullivan laughed as he watched the human ship crawl into the asteroid field. The USS Defiance moved between the floating rocks like a sick whale trying to swim. It had taken the humans 3 weeks to follow his trail this far. 3 weeks of always being too late, always being too slow. Look at that pathetic thing, Sullivan said to his crew. The Vexian pirate captain was tall and thin with dark red skin and sharp teeth. His people were born raiders, fast and deadly. I almost feel sorry for them. Sullivan's fleet had been hiding in the asteroid field for 2 days. 12 ships all painted black to blend in with the dark rocks. They had sensors that could see the human ship coming from hours away. They had weapons that could punch holes through thick armor. They had engines that could outrun anything in human space. The Defiance kept moving deeper into the asteroid field. Sullivan could see it on his screens, struggling to navigate between the rocks. A few times it almost hit an asteroid. Each time it had to stop and slowly change course. Captain, said his weapons officer, should we attack now? Not yet, Sullivan replied. Let them get deeper. I want to have some fun first. On the Defiance, Captain Morrison sat quietly in his command chair. His crew looked nervous. They were surrounded by asteroids and enemy ships. Lieutenant Amy Carter kept checking her sensors, but the pirates were hidden too well to get a clear reading. Captain, Amy whispered, I'm reading at least 10 ships in this field. Maybe more. They're all around us. Morrison nodded. I see them. Sir, we should retreat. We're outnumbered and outgunned. Are we? Morrison asked. Before Amy could answer, the pirates made their move. Sullivan's ships came out from behind the asteroids like hunting wolves. They moved fast and smooth, surrounding the human vessel. In seconds, Sullivan opened a communication channel to the Defiance. His face appeared on Morrison's main screen, grinning with sharp teeth. "Captain Morrison, I've been waiting for you," Sullivan said. "You've been following me for weeks like a lost puppy. Did you really think you could catch me?" Morrison looked at the pirate captain with calm eyes. "Yes." Sullivan laughed so hard he almost fell out of his chair. "You? Catch me? Look around you, human. You're surrounded by 12 of the fastest ships in the galaxy. Your slow turtle doesn't stand a chance. We'll..." "See?" Morrison said quietly. "I'll tell you what," Sullivan said. "I'm feeling generous today. I'll give you a 5-minute head start. Try to run. See how far you get before we blast you into space dust." Morrison turned to his crew. "Ben, are you ready?" Chief Engineer Ben. Clark's hands were already on his control panel. "Ready, sir." "Amy, weapon status?" Lieutenant Amy Carter looked confused but checked her screens. "All weapons online, sir. But Captain, I don't understand. How can we fight 12 ships?" Morrison pressed a button on his chair. "All hands. This is the captain. Prepare for combat operations. Protocol Endurance is now active." Across the ship, the crew felt something change. The lights got brighter. The engines hummed with more power. Systems that had been quiet for weeks suddenly came to life. In the engine room, Ben Clark watched his power readings jump from 15% to 100%. The ship's true power core came online for the first time since they left port. It was like watching a sleeping giant wake up. Sullivan was still talking on the communication channel, making jokes about slow humans and their hopeless situation. Then he noticed something strange on his sensors. "What's happening to your ship?" Sullivan asked. His smile was fading. The Defiance was changing. The slow, clumsy movements stopped. The ship began to move through the asteroid field with smooth, precise motions. It wasn't fast like the Vexian ships, but it wasn't slow anymore either. It moved with the steady, unstoppable motion of something that had all the time in the world. "Ben," Morrison said, "show them what we really are." The Defiance's weapons came online, not the simple guns that most ships carried, but something else. Something that had been hidden beneath false panels and fake sensor readings. The weapons were designed for one purpose: to never miss their target. Sullivan's ships tried to use their speed advantage. They darted between asteroids, spinning and diving like dancers. But the human weapons tracked them perfectly. Every shot was calculated, every blast was aimed with computer precision. The first pirate ship exploded in a ball of fire. Then the second. The Vexians realized that speed meant nothing if your enemy could predict exactly where you were going to be. "Impossible!" Sullivan screamed into his communicator. "Your ship is supposed to be slow." Morrison's voice came back calm and steady. "We are slow, Captain Sullivan. We're also patient, and we never give up." The Defiance began to hunt the pirate ships one by one. It didn't chase them like a normal warship would. Instead, it moved with the methodical precision of a predator that knew its prey was already caught. Every time a pirate ship tried to escape, the human vessel was already there waiting. Sullivan watched his fleet being destroyed with growing horror. His ships were faster, but they couldn't shake the human vessel. It followed them through the asteroids like it could read their minds. Every time they thought they had escaped, the Defiance appeared from behind a rock, weapons ready. "This isn't possible," Sullivan muttered. "Humans are supposed to be weak. They're supposed to be slow." His communications officer was pale with fear. "Captain, we've lost 8 ships. The human vessel hasn't taken any damage." Sullivan looked at his sensors. The Defiance was still moving with that same steady, unstoppable motion. It wasn't trying to be fast. It didn't need to be fast. It just needed to be everywhere its enemies tried to run. For the first time in his life, Captain Drake Sullivan understood what it meant to be hunted by something that would never stop coming. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In every space station, on every ship, Through every communication network, the same impossible story was being told. The slow human warship had destroyed an entire pirate fleet. All 12 ships. Gone. At first, nobody believed it. Commander Zakthor was having lunch with other Kalani officers when the report came in. He almost choked on his food when he heard the newsreader's voice coming from the cantina's speakers. The Vexian pirate fleet led by Captain Drake Sullivan has been completely destroyed by a single human vessel, the USS Defiance, which took over 3 weeks to track down the raiders. Eliminated all 12 enemy ships in less than 2 hours. That's impossible, Zakthor said to his friends. I've seen that human ship. It moves like a dying animal. There's no way it could defeat 12 Vexian raiders. But the reports kept coming. Survivors from Sullivan's crew told the same story over and over. The human ship had changed from a slow, clumsy vessel into something else. Something that hunted with cold precision. Something that never stopped coming. Ambassador Veltra was in an emergency meeting on her homeworld when the news reached the Asthan Republic. The silver-skinned diplomat sat at a large table with other government officials, trying to understand what they were hearing. Are we certain this report is accurate? Asked High Counselor Thexmar, the leader of the Asthan military. 3 different sources have confirmed it, Veltra replied. The human vessel destroyed Sullivan's entire fleet without taking any damage itself. But that's impossible. We've seen their ships. They're primitive. Veltra looked at the reports on her tablet. Apparently, we were wrong. On Earth, Admiral Carl Brooks sat in his office reading the detailed combat report from Captain Morrison. Brooks was a big man with white hair and scars on his hands from his younger days as a ship captain. He had been waiting for this moment. For a long time. A knock came at his door. Come in, Brooks said. Senator Maya Torres entered the office. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who represented Earth in the Galactic Council. Admiral, I need to understand what happened out there. How did one of our ships destroy 12 enemy vessels? Brooks smiled. Senator, what do you know about persistence hunting? Nothing. Sit down, I'll explain. Brooks pulled up a holographic display showing ancient Earth. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors hunted animals that were faster and stronger than they were. But humans had one advantage: we never gave up. We would follow an animal for days, sometimes weeks, until it collapsed from exhaustion. That's interesting history, Admiral, but what does it have to do with spaceships? Everything. Brooks changed the display to show technical drawings of human warships. Our ships aren't designed to be fast. They're designed to never stop. They can run for months without refueling. Their crews can stay alert for weeks without rest. Their weapons are built for accuracy, not speed. Torres studied the drawings. So our ships are endurance hunters? Exactly. We let other species think we're weak and slow because it makes them underestimate us. But when we need to hunt something down, we become the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The senator looked worried. Admiral, if this gets out, it could change everything. Other species might see us as a threat. They already do, Brooks replied. They just don't know it yet. Across the galaxy, military leaders were having similar conversations. The Kalani High Command called an emergency meeting to discuss the human threat. The Vexian Trade Union began reviewing their military contracts with Earth. Even the powerful Asthan Republic started looking at human ships with new eyes. High Counselor Thexmar stood before the Asthan Military Council with a worried expression. If the humans can destroy 12 ships with one vessel, what happens when they decide to use their entire fleet? Sir, said a young officer, should we consider them hostile? I don't know, Thexmar replied, but I think we need to be very careful about how we treat them from now on. The fear was spreading. Species that had laughed at human ships just weeks before were now afraid to meet them in open space. Trade routes that passed through human territory became busy with nervous alien merchants. Pirate fleets that had ignored human colonies began avoiding them completely. On the bridge of the USS Defiance, Captain Morrison read the reports coming in from across the galaxy. His crew was celebrating their victory, but Morrison knew this was just the beginning. Captain, Lieutenant Amy Carter said, Earth Command says other species are asking questions about our ship designs. They want to know how we became so effective. Morrison closed his tablet. What did Command tell them? Nothing, sir. They said it's classified. Good. Amy looked confused. Sir, don't you want other species to know how capable we are? Morrison looked out at the stars through the bridge windows. Amy, the most dangerous predator is the one that looks harmless until it's too late. If everyone knows what we can do, we lose our advantage. But sir, won't they figure it out eventually? Some will. But by then, it won't matter. Morrison turned back to his crew. Set course for Earth. I think it's time we had a conversation with Admiral Brooks about the future. As the Defiance began its journey home, other human ships across the galaxy were receiving new orders. Ships that had been pretending to be slow and weak were quietly being repositioned. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had been playing a very long game, and they were winning. 6 months had passed since the destruction of Captain Sullivan's pirate fleet. The USS Defiance was returning to Nexus Station for the first time since the battle, but this time, everything was different. The space station looked the same from the outside. Ships came and went just like before. But when the human vessel appeared on the long-range sensors, something changed. Other ships that had been moving toward the docking bays suddenly slowed down. Some changed course completely. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his bridge and watched the familiar sight of the station growing larger on his screen. But the docking approach was different now. No one was laughing. No one was pointing. The alien crews that had once gathered to watch the slow human ship were nowhere to be seen. Captain, said Lieutenant Amy Carter, traffic control is giving us priority docking. They're clearing Bay 7 for us. Bay 7 was the largest docking bay on the station. It was usually reserved for diplomatic ships and important military vessels. 6 months ago, the humans had been given a small cargo bay at the back of the station. Interesting, Morrison said quietly. The Defiance docked smoothly and quickly. Morrison had allowed his crew to operate at full capacity during the approach. The ship moved through the docking procedures with the kind of precision that made other captains nervous. As Morrison walked off his ship, he noticed the change immediately. The station corridors that had once been filled with noise and chatter were unusually quiet. Aliens who saw him coming would step to the side and bow their heads slightly. Some even moved to different corridors to avoid meeting him. Morrison made his way to the cantina where he had first met Commander Zach Thor. The room was about half full, much quieter than he remembered. When he entered, conversations stopped. Aliens turned to look at him, then quickly looked away. Morrison sat at the same corner table he had used 6 months ago. This time, no one laughed. No one made jokes about slow human ships. Instead, they whispered to each other in worried voices. After a few minutes, someone approached his table. It was Commander Zach Thor, but the proud Kalani officer looked very different. His shoulders were bent and his eyes were focused on the floor. Captain Morrison, Zach Thor said quietly, may I speak with you? Of course. Zach Thor sat down across from Morrison. The alien's hands were shaking slightly. Captain, I owe you an apology. I said things about your ship and your people that were wrong. Very wrong. Morrison sipped his coffee. You didn't know. But I should have known. I should have realized that a species doesn't reach the stars by being weak. Zach Thor looked up with desperate eyes. Captain, I have a request. What is it? I want to serve on a human ship. I want to learn your ways. I want to understand how you hunt. Morrison studied the Kalani commander. 6 months ago, this same alien had called his ship a turtle and laughed at human military tactics. Now he was begging to join a human crew. Why? Morrison asked. Because I'm tired of being afraid, Zach Thor replied. Every time I see a human ship on my sensors, I wonder if it's hunting me. I can't sleep, I can't think clearly. I need to know that humans are my friends, not my enemies. Before Morrison could answer, another voice interrupted them. Captain Morrison? Morrison turned to see Ambassador Veltra approaching his table. The Asthan diplomat looked as nervous as Zakthor. "Ambassador," Morrison said politely. "Captain, I represent the Asthan Republic. We would like to discuss a formal alliance with Earth. That's a matter for diplomats, not ship captains." "Please," Veltra said, sitting down without being invited. "The Republic has authorized me to offer you anything you want. Trade agreements, technology sharing, military support. We just want to ensure that Earth sees us as friends." Morrison looked around the cantina. Other aliens were watching their conversation with interest. He could see the fear in their eyes, the way they hung on every word. "What changed your mind about humans?" Morrison asked. Veltra looked embarrassed. "We realized that we made a mistake. We thought your ships were primitive because they were slow. We didn't understand that slow can be more dangerous than fast." "How so?" "Because fast ships have to stop. They run out of fuel, or their crews get tired, or their engines break down. But your ships never stop. They just keep coming. Forever." Morrison finished his coffee and stood up. "I'll pass your offer along to Earth Command." As he walked toward the exit, Morrison noticed that every alien in the cantina was watching him. Some looked afraid. Others looked hopeful. All of them looked respectful. Outside in the corridor, Morrison was stopped by a young Vexian trader. "Captain Morrison," the alien said, "I heard you destroyed Captain Sullivan's fleet." "That's correct. Sullivan killed my brother 3 years ago. I just wanted to say thank you." Morrison nodded and continued walking. He had similar encounters 5 more times before he reached his ship. Pirates who had terrorized trade routes for years had suddenly disappeared. Alien merchants were reporting the safest shipping routes in decades. Back on the Defiance, Amy Carter was reading reports from across the galaxy. "Captain, it's amazing. Pirate activity is down 70% in human space. Some raider fleets have completely disbanded rather than risk meeting our ships." Morrison sat in his captain's chair and looked out at the stars. "Fear can be a powerful tool, Amy, but it's not the only tool we have." "Sir, the aliens are afraid of us now, but fear alone won't keep the peace. We need to show them that humans can be trusted friends as well as dangerous enemies." Amy thought about this. "How do we do that?" Morrison smiled. "The same way we've always done things, patiently and carefully." The next morning, the Defiance left Nexus Station. Other ships gave it a wide berth as it departed, but Morrison noticed something else. 3 alien vessels fell in behind his ship, following at a respectful distance. They weren't being hunted. They were asking for protection. Morrison opened a BO communication channel to the 3 ships. "This is Captain Morrison of the USS Defiance. You're welcome to travel with us if you're heading toward Earth space." The grateful replies came immediately. Morrison smiled and settled back in his chair. The galaxy was learning that humans could be patient hunters when necessary, but they were also learning that humans could be reliable guardians. The age of human weakness was over. The age of human patience had begun,